Hello, everybody. Josh here on The Wrong Lead, and I'm very excited for, it's funny. I didn't think of what to call this. We have a name for all the type of content we do. Obviously we have our two different podcasts going on, but this was just an idea I had popped in my head. And, you know, being inside horse racing, we did a conversation maybe a couple of weeks ago about how niche it is. We compared it to bowling. Like how many people are still bowling out there, right? And my friend Andrew, who I do a podcast with, he brought up a quote.
Comparison.
Yeah, he brought up a quote about bowling, and he's like, replace the word bowling with horse racing in all these spots, and it worked. And you guys have heard on the podcast, on the various streams, I love Las Vegas. I consume probably as much Las Vegas content as I can, and gambling content, 360 Vegas, Vital Vegas, and you can bet on that, Crap Vegas, and then of course the Bettor Life. And I have Mr. Tim Lawson here from the Bettor Life, one of my favorite podcasts out there. And Tim, you've done a couple of, we'll say, horse racing centric podcasts. You do a lot of other just great stuff. And there was a moment when I was listening to one of your podcasts where I was just like, I need to get him on and talk about horse racing. And it was, I believe, I forgot, you were there for a conference and you saw a Buffalo machine that was going EV. And you're like, I'm going to sit at this thing until this thing hits.
8 hours.
Yeah. And it's just so funny because literally probably about a month or two later, I was walking past, I think Buffalo Ascension. And, I was just like, I was like, those stacks are pretty high. And so I went on to, Wizard of Vegas or whatever real quick. And someone had suggested, like, after so many combinations, it's probably EV, plus EV. So I proceeded to sit down and play through that probably for it wasn't 8 hours. It was 2 hours. And I ended up, plus like $70 or something. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was funny. I saw an opportunity. I jumped on it. And once I saw that, I'm like, I need to get him on. But yeah. Thanks for coming on.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad that story amused as many people as it did. Buffalo Ascension's a really interesting game. It's all about people look at like the levels but it's about how many different ways you're getting paid. Like that's when you can pick up on the EV. And 2 hours for $70 may not seem like a lot of money, but 2 hours of all that coin in. I don't know where you're playing, but the hidden part of AP slots that doesn't get talked about enough because people only really care about the monetary value of the play is all like if you enjoy casinos, if you enjoy Las Vegas, the comps that are going to come with all that coin in is also an added benefit.
Yeah, it's very much the video poker comparison, right?
Yep.
When you sit at the video poker bar and like you're giving up maybe a percentage, 2%, depending on how bad the game you're sitting at is. But you're giving up a couple of percentage points on the pay table. But you're getting the best drink service you're going to get anywhere in Las Vegas at this point. We could probably talk all about how things have changed in the last couple of years for the negative, but we'll save that for another discussion.
But another day.
Yeah, but. Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about your podcast and kind of how you kind of fit into, I guess, the sports gambling and Vegas scene a little bit.
Yes, I've been a gambler, my whole life. I remember playing, Golden Nugget 64, when I was in middle school. If anybody even remembers that game it was a Golden Nugget themed casino video game for the Nintendo 64. I was playing poker with my friends. The gambling had always fascinated me, and that carried on into adulthood. And going in 2017, I picked up podcasting in like 2011, and I became a podcaster. I was launching podcasts with the podcast, see what would stick, see what didn't. And eventually I was like, you know what? I really want to do gambling content. Like I was inspired. The Super Bowl, Patriots, Eagles. I was at a Super Bowl party. This is pre-PASPA, or pre-PASPA being repealed, and you know, everybody's watching a game as a fan. I'm watching a game as a bettor, and I realize, oh man, my experience right now is different than everybody else's in the room, right? And that's where like the idea of the better life came from, right? Like my right now, the way I'm living my life in the same exact event, like it's just different. And that you can apply this to any hobby or skills or any like but for me, seeing seeing the world through the lens of a gambler. And so I launched the Bettor Life in 2018, largely one, because I wanted to do content on gambling, and two, I was ready to embrace that side of me a little bit more, right? I didn't have friends really who gambled. Like I had one or two friends here and there going through life. I didn't really have I didn't have like community. I didn't have friends that go to the casino with, like Mark and Dr. Mike from You Can Bet on That. Just friends always going to the casino. I never had anything like that. And so to just embrace that side of my life and to delve more into the topic, I launched the Bettor Life, and it's we're 220 something episodes strong now, 5 years later, almost 6 years, and it's easily the longest podcast that I've ever done. And my wife even said before, like as I was starting, she's like, "This might be the best show you do." I think she's right. I think a lot of the quality that I've put in content has come out in the Bettor Life, and it even now as I battle with time, being a new father and such, I still feel a calling to produce content like this.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's really funny because I think we have somewhat similar stories. For me, I remember playing this Super Nintendo game. I believe I think it was called Vegas Stakes,
Vegas Stakes.
and
Okay.
it was like a role playing game. Like there was a story involved.
Oh my god.
And like people would like approach you and like you would have conversations and someone's like, "Hey, I'm down on my luck. Can you buy my watch?" And like sometimes you'd buy it and it'd be a dud. And other times you'd buy it and it'd be worth like thousands of dollars. And like it was just so hilarious. Yeah, I honestly what really it was the 360 Vegas podcast that really got me into doing it. I don't know if I've ever actually I've interacted with them. I've sent them emails before. I don't know if I've ever actually told them that, but at a certain point, I was listening. I'm like, this is so much fun. These are just three people sitting around, drinking, having a good time, talking about something they love. And so, like, basically, that's kind of the whole premise of this is, me and my buddies will pour some bourbon, sit here, look at the races on Saturday and talk about them and, just have fun with it. So, but yeah,
You should tell them. Mark would be flattered.
I'll reach out to him. I'll send him a message. I think at one point I told him I was thinking about starting something, and then at a certain point we just like, all right, let's do it. I've yet to meet them. I go out to Vegas a couple times a year, and I've yet to go out there and meet up with them or go for one of the vacations. But it's coming.
The vacations are great. That community of people is great. That it's interesting in this podcasting online Twitter community that we have, right? There's like three subsets, right? You have like the Vegas community, you have the gambling community, which is like kind of all encompassing, maybe a little more casino heavy, and then you have the sports betting community. And in the Venn diagram of it all, there's plenty of overlap, right? But like it's interesting when of all the shows you mentioned, like 360 Vegas is obviously more Vegas focused, right? Crap Vegas, a really good blend of gambling and Vegas. You Can Bet on That, nice blend of all of it, right? Because my show talk about gambling all over the place. It's a little more gambling and sports betting is where the Venn diagram touches a little bit more, right? Obviously, Vegas is the a location often discussed, but it's interesting how everybody sort of has their own corner of the community, and depending on who you're with or what you're doing, you're with a similar group of people, but in a different dynamic based on what the event is or what the celebration is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you get bits and pieces from all of it, right? Like you listen to like 360 Vegas, and like I said, they're very much Vegas focused. They'll talk a little bit about their video poker play or whatever, and how Karen's only playing 4 coins and someone's yelling at her or whatever. But yeah, like there's just like various stuff that they cover. Obviously the Chris and Josh with Crap Vegas, they're on the higher end, right, with the comps and everything. They talk about Aria, and they shill for win constantly. But yeah, no, it's really cool. And I don't know, it just gets me excited to go there basically every time. So I actually have a trip coming up the week before March Madness. I was going to go
Okay.
for March Madness this year. I'm not a huge college basketball person, but I'll bet March Madness all the time. I've been delving more into sports betting with some of the issues that we've been having here with horse racing, but we'll get into that a little bit here. So what sports betting is, obviously, I think you've mentioned before, is probably your main form of gambling. What other casino games you like to do? Like
Oh
when you go
man.
to Vegas, what else are you doing?
So long time blackjack player, right? I mean, the blackjack, I think, is like the gateway to game for so many people, right? It's one you're familiar with. And then when I started the Bettor Life, look, what's funny is when I started the Bettor Life, yeah, I was a gambler, I was in that sort of stuff, but I was not as knowledgeable about the stuff as I, definitely now, and even a couple years into doing the Bettor Life. And I really fell in love with the game of craps, around that time. I used to be a don't player. I don't play the don't nearly as much as I used to. But now craps is what I do with my friends when I'm at like community meetups. I really enjoy Baccarat and Pai Gow. Those are probably the two games that I seek out the most when I'm at a casino, whether it's just me or I'm just with like a friend or two. You can really slow down the game. You can enjoy it a little bit more. Your loss rate per hour is better, right? So I can go to a $50 Baccarat table and I can play it in a way that has a loss rate per hour that's better than a $15 craps table, right? And my craps, my comps are going to be probably better. The service I get from the staff is probably going to be better. The drink, I may even be in a high limit room where like I can get a better, glass of whiskey, or something like that. So, yeah, I've really leaned that way in a way, but I'm comfortable at any table, and with the right company, any game's fun.
Yeah, and I've talked about actually on one of the podcasts that we do here about craps, and how like you'll be playing $5 craps, right? Maybe, and now you have to play electronic if you want to get that, but you'll be playing $5 craps, and it's like you look down and you have like $125 out there, because right, like you're pressing your numbers, right, and it's just like you're like, what the heck, like it's like this is a $5 game, like why do I have so much out there? But yeah, it's tough. It's tough now to get anything that's especially on craps, to get anything that's affordable to be able to play with any kind of like maxing out odds and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean it's changing, but at least with craps they can't change the game too much. So the electronic one, like the rules are
Just wait
somewhat
till
okay.
crapsless craps is the only thing in the casino,
Dude,
my man.
that's gonna be
So we're gonna get to a point, I think, where in the same way that like 000 roulette is the cheap game of roulette, and then if you want to play 0 you got to go find like the expensive table like in a nice room. I
mhm.
think we're gonna get to a point where crapless craps is the cheap option, and then normal craps is going to maybe not be like high limit, but like it's going to be a quarter like everywhere, right? Like the $10-15 tables are going to be the crapless, and like, and I'm not saying this isn't happening like imminently, but I think we're going down that path with how many crapless craps tables are starting to hit the floor. Like I think we're on that path.
Yeah, I've actually yet to play at a live craps table
Oh,
because I just like I go and it's $15-$25, and it's like, if I like to cover a bunch of numbers, and it's like you do
yeah.
that, playing $15, now you're like, all right, I guess I'll cover one number. And I don't know, the action junkie in me is just like, I'd rather play the $5 bubble craps and cover, 3 or 4 numbers than play 15 and only cover one, or only play pass line and odds. But yeah, I'll get to it at some point, or maybe if I get out to a cheaper place. I live outside of Chicago.
Yeah.
Limits are even higher here than they are in Vegas. They're insane. Like
What
like the
like even at Rivers over there, and
Rivers is the worst. Rivers
is
is
it really?
probably $50.
No
$50.
kidding.
Yeah, it's like it's the same issue like they have out on the East Coast with like the Encore that's out there
Yeah.
in was it in the harbor.
What
Um,
about I was at Harrah's Joliet. I was there. I mean that's pre-COVID. Who knows? I don't
yeah,
know if that, but
that's really the only place to go
okay.
is Harrah's Joliet. But and then
Horseshoe
now,
Hammond. That's a nice property.
yeah, it
I
is a
mean it's
nice
in
property.
Indiana, but yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. But like my problem is now is being the I'm not gonna say comps junkie because it's not really like I'm chasing comps or like going there, but like I'm MGM through and through
Yeah.
because
Same.
they've just treated me the best. I mean, Caesars for the most part, like getting a free room out of them was like pulling teeth for some reason. MGM like is like, oh, here's not only are you getting free room, you're getting free play, you're getting food and beverage, and like I love the Luxor, and
Okay.
I'm like, they're like, hey, if you stay at the Luxor, we'll give you even more money. I'm like,
Yeah.
sign me up, man. I don't care. I love the south end of the strip. But so like playing at my local properties, it's like, all right, I can play Caesars. And then it's like I feel like I'm like that's money I could have saved for Vegas, But yeah, so I actually haven't really checked out those places for table games. But now, like I said, since I've basically discovered horse racing a couple of years ago, I mean that's kind of scratched the itch for me when I want to gamble, and now obviously sports betting as well. Why don't you've done, like I said, a couple episodes about horse racing, but what
Yeah.
I guess in general, what has your relationship with horse racing kind of been?
So I was actually trying to think about this coming in, like trying to think of like when the first time I was at a track was. I was having a hard time. Like my memory isn't so great, but I'm pretty sure I was at a track one time. I think the first track I've been was at, I believe, was Lima, Peru. When I would live down there, they had a track, and I'm pretty sure me and some friends went. If my memory is correct, I have a vivid. I can see the track in my head, and I'm pretty sure. Like I was in the Marine Corps, right? I drank a lot when I was deployed, so like my memory's a little phasey or a little fuzzy from some of these. But I'm pretty sure that. And I think that might have been the first time that I was legitimately like at a track betting, watching horse, and of course, like anybody else, I was choosing the cool names, right? Like the names were all I was betting on. I never was really, I lived up I grew up in the Northwest. The closest track was like 2 hours away. It wasn't part of like the family culture or anything like that, right? So, even I really wasn't even familiar with horse racing all that much until just as I became an adult, even into my late 20s. And the Bettor Life has really opened my eyes to horse racing. One, because now that so Hollywood Charlestown, which is about an hour and a half from DC, they have a track out there. I've been there plenty of times, and I really like it. I before becoming a father, like I would, I'd have my own little nights out, and that's what I would do. I would drive out to to the casino there, and I would spend, I would watch 8 races and drink 4 beers, and I'd be out $20. You know what I mean? Like, and $40 for the entire night, off of bets and beer. So entertainment wise, it's pound for pound like the best gambling out there, right? When you think about how affordable wagering can be. So many, and I mentioned this to you before, when we first got on the call, so many of the interviews, some of the people that have had featured on the Bettor Life have started their interview, like the first question of what was your first exposure to gambling. So many of them talk about, the horse track with dad, the horse track with, grandma. I remember, grandpa having, action at the track. Like it was a part of so many people, especially if you grew up on the East Coast or, in near the Kentucky area. Like people remember, Saratoga, so many of these, places that were really like rich in horse racing culture, 20, 30 years ago. People remember that. And, you know, now most recently, if I have a day off to myself, I might pull up one of my betting apps and I will pull up, some TVG or whatever sites I'm going to be able to stream, whatever. If Gulfstream has a set of races going that day, I'm going to pull up and like, I don't know what I'm looking at, like I'm still a recreational bettor when it comes to horse racing. I like looking at like a track history and stuff like that, but I'm making stuff up on why what I'm looking at matters or what it
Yeah.
means. But there's no denying that when you see the gate fly open and the horses come out the gate, that it doesn't matter if you have $2 on the 2-to-1 horse or $2 on the 50-to-1 horse, or you have a $3 exacta. Like, you could be betting so little, and there's that little bit of like energy that you get out of it. And it's really unfortunate that horse racing isn't receiving any sort of isn't getting any benefit from this resurgence of gambling inside of America. We all know that prior to PASPA being repealed, that people were betting on sports. We all know that people were into gambling, but PASPA made gambling okay, stigma wise, right? The repeal of it, right? Now that it's legalized in more than half the country, casinos, are people are going to their local casinos almost more often than they're taking trips to Las Vegas. But yet horse racing still just is not getting any of that buzz. And part of me thinks that there's a cultural shift on I would say, I think that there is uncertainty about what's happening with the horses. And it doesn't help that the biggest race of the year always has controversy, at least in recent history, of what people and it if you're just a recreational gambler and you've thought about betting on horses, and then the Kentucky Derby comes around and you hear about steroids and dying, and all the you hear about someone being banned because of mistreatment of horses. What a cheat is like. Why would I get involved in this industry if like the biggest event can't a year can't go by without there being bad news on it. So I joke with my gambling friends, like, which sport's going to die faster, boxing or horse racing. Both of them just struggling to really get a resurgence with these with gambling. But I think what's interesting about horse racing compared to boxing is I think more people are interested in dabbling in horse racing. I think more people are like and I compare it to boxing because it's another sport that has gambling implications that seems to have had its heyday, but is struggling to maintain support. Horse race. I remember when we were at Foxwoods, we spent like an hour and a half one time sitting in. This was, they didn't have a sports book or anything. They had a race book, a full-fledged race book, and we all had a blast. And what's funny is we just got done spending, dropping hundreds at the crap stable, and here we are rooting in our $2, place bet on the 4-horse. So yeah, it is interesting. I'm curious what your thoughts are, having recently gone into the sport and creating content around it. Why isn't a affordable, entertaining, accessible form of gambling more popular?
No, I think you ask a good question, because we talk about it. I have a buddy who I do a podcast with, Andrew. He actually used to work for HRTV, which was Horse Racing TV, and then eventually they got merged into TVG, and so he used to do work with them. And he's got the saying where people always say, we have to grow the game, and then someone comes up with a suggestion, and the response to that is always, you want to do what? And it's really funny. You think about the VIG on horse racing. The VIG is on the low end. We'll say there's a couple of bets that are 12%. In the medium end, 15 to 18%, and some of them go all the way up to 25%. Just taken out of the pool right away when you bet. And it's funny because the average player is just getting absolutely destroyed by that in of itself. And now I think, especially with, like you said, the other options with wagering. I mean, what's the hold on a money line bet? For college basketball. I mean, if I'll look at unabated. Sometimes the holds at as low as 2%.
Hmm.
On some, depending on how many markets you're looking at. It's never really more than 5 or 6, and it's I think now with the amount of options people have, it's getting tough, and it's really funny because you think about all the advantages that horse racing had. I remember being at we were at for March Madness. We went to this bar just to watch the games. This was before you could bet on it. This was probably like 2019, and I was with my brother who works for J.P. Morgan, and he was with a bunch of his coworkers, and he invited me out, and so we were just sitting there hanging out. This place was also an OTB,
Hmm.
and so they had the horse races on some smaller TVs on the right.
Yeah.
And so my brother and I were watching it. We're like, oh, let's go make a bet. And so we're firing away at horse races. And the guys are asking, he's like, what are you guys doing? It's like, oh, we're betting the horse races. They're like, how? Like we haven't seen you guys leave your chair. They're like, oh, you can bet on your phone. They're like, you can? I'm like, yeah, you've been able to bet on your phone basically as long as smartphones have been around,
It's
basically.
true. Yeah.
And what happened as soon as sports betting got into the palm of people's hands? It just exploded. And
Yeah.
it's just like I feel like there was just a lot of untapped potential in that. And you're right. You could go to a horse racing, go for a day of horse racing. Uh, you know, Most of the time they don't charge you to get in. Some of the places do. They'll charge you a couple bucks, but you pay a couple bucks for the program, and you fire away $2 to win on every race. You hit two of them, you probably wash, your entire trip. And worst case, you're out $20. It's it's tough, especially in the day where you do see limits on everything else. Vegas, everything's getting more expensive. Horse racing hasn't gotten more expensive since its inception. It's been a $2 win bet, going all the way back to when the tote started.
Yeah.
And back then that $2 was probably closer to 20 or $30, maybe even more. So I don't know. It's a really good question, and it's funny because, like, I listen to your content, and I listen to other gambling content, and it's like these people love action. These people love to bet. I mean, heck, there was an episode of You Can Bet on That where he was playing craps and then turning around and playing craps on the electronic machine behind him in
Yeah.
between rolls.
Yeah.
Like, the dude was dual boxing craps.
Yeah.
It's just
Mark
like,
hates a slow game, so when the live table was getting slow, he'd turn around and was playing a little bit on the electronic game. Yeah.
and then in the middle of the summer, I mean, if you're betting horses, you got a new race to bet basically every couple minutes. So it's tough. I
You know,
got
in
no idea.
in the days that I only get to telework like once a week. These days, I'm often in the office. But like in 2021, when I was teleworking practically every day. uh it was fun to have you know okay, there's 10 races going on a Gulfstream today. I'm gonna go through to like setting up my bets, and like having it sort of sitting in the corner and like just doing my work. And it was like actually a nice little brain break, right? You do some work, like, oh, the race is about to start. Let me pull up the stream, and you watch it, you get excited, whatever. You forget what horse you bet, you have to quickly look, oh, what did I bet on this? And it's a nice little way to pass the time, especially during the day on the East Coast when most sports aren't going to start till 7 p.m. at night anyways. And then in person, just, you could be like, you're pretty much on the rail, right? And these magnificent beasts just fly past you with this thunder. It is a feeling that cannot be replicated. Maybe, similar to, I mean, I was even say like car racing, but that's not, that's like man-made machine. Like you're talking about these like beasts that are flying down, and it's one of those things that it's like you don't realize what that looks or feels like when you're watching it until you've actually been at the rail. Um, it's it's an the problem. I don't know how close anybody is to a horse track anymore, right? Like how, like I said, I'd have to drive an hour and a half to get to the horse track that I want to go to, right? That's a 3 hour round trip. That means that I'm either, pulling a super late night coming back, or I have to make it an overnight now, right? And do I want to do that, or do I just want to smash some video poker at MGM National Harbor, which is a 10-minute drive down the road? So I can, the virtual option of streaming. I mean, you can stream just about any track you want now, which is cool. And there's a way to get action down on it, and that's fun. But to really get people into the sport, you need them to experience it live more, like often enough to where they they have that like yearn for it, like, oh, I want to go to the track soon. And I just don't know many people that live close enough to a track that has routine races on a regular basis that you can reliably go to. um, I think it's got to be one of the biggest struggles. And then casinos are popping up all over the place, right? So are you going to go out of your way to possibly go to a track that may or may not have a casino attached to it, or isn't as nice of a casino as the one that just got built down the road? um, like you have to, looking at the gamble itself, it's a big question mark of like, why aren't more people into this? Because it clearly it's affordable, it's appealing, it's thrilling, right? You could you could make the argument that sitting at the rail watching your horse fly by you, right, is just about as thrilling as like being on a hot roll and watching those dice, dance around a table before settling. Um, the problem is it's easier to get to the dice table for most people than it is to get to the track.
Yeah, there's something, and I always tell people, I think what really got me hooked was just the feeling of being right. You know, like there's just something, you get this weird rush when I first started playing, I was doing the same. I was just picking names or whatever, and I just remember there was the first derby I watched was the year that Justify won, and in one of the well, I've watched other derbies. That was the first one I bet on, and one of the races before, there was this horse called Funny Duck. It was in the Pat Day Mile. It's a mile race for 3-year-olds, and I don't remember what I read a note somewhere on the random program I found on Reddit, and it said like, "Oh, this horse might like to run in the slop" or something like that, or maybe if the track is wet, this horse might run well. And there was a deluge, right? It was just muddy everywhere, and I'm like looking, and the horse is like 30 to 1, 35 to 1, and so I'm like, I'll put $5 on it.
Yeah.
And you see the horse just come up the rail and win, and then you're just like, look at all these idiots that they let that horse go off at that huge price. It's like it's the same as like betting soccer, and you see you're betting a 3-way and you bet the underdog and the underdog wins, and
That.
it's just the greatest feeling. And it's I don't know, it's a
And
mystery why it doesn't take off. But
at 35 to 1, you're talking about a roulette single bet too, right? Like that's
yep.
the same payoff for. And think about the excitement and the the amount of entertainment value you got out of that $5 wager watching, and then there's actually opportunity to have enjoyed it too, right? Like at a roulette table, as soon as your chips are coming near, they're asking for your next bet, right? At the track, you get to go inside. You can make your bet for the next race if you haven't yet. You can go get a beer. You can kind of enjoy the atmosphere. I think that's one thing, and maybe getting a little bit more into the mental and emotional health aspect of where life was in 2021. But there was something really nice, and that was the year that I went to the track the most often, because I had the most opportunity. And there's something about like forcing yourself to have to slow down and not be in a rush about something that was really satisfying. And in the casino, I think you can feel this pressure to like always be involved in something, right? And to always be, I mean, can you imagine being at a craps table and not having a chip on the table, like the anxiety that would bring, you know? Um, but like it was nice being able to go to a horse race and it finishes and either you're disappointed because you didn't get anything, or oh heck, that was a wash or whatever it might be. And then you have an opportunity to just sort of take your time, right? Like, and you almost have to, especially, you know, Hollywood Charlestown, there was a casino attached to it, but like it wasn't practical to wander into the casino between races, right? But it did make sense to, I don't know, maybe have a cigarette. I'm not condoning smoking, but we all have our casino habits. And, have a beer, go for a little walk, maybe maybe post the photo you took of the horse race on Twitter or whatever it be. I mean, it was nice to. It was a really nice environment to like force myself to have to sort of take my time through the night and not just blow hundreds of money on a craps table.
Yeah, and with every year I try to go to Saratoga, and if you've ever been there or if you haven't, like what's cool is if you just get general admission, which is like I said, a couple bucks, they let you roll in the cooler. You roll in the cooler. I got a buddy who'll drive. He'll get heady toppers, right? And we're just out there in the middle of summer drinking heady toppers,
Oh my
like
God.
sitting in like it's like a park basically. And then every half hour we get up. Hey, let's go to the rail and let's watch this race. And in the middle of a upstate New York summer, it's like nothing else, man. It's really really cool. And it's just like you don't have other other experiences like that. Like I guess like the closest I could think of is like going to Wrigley, right? You go to Wrigley Field, and for the longest time, I mean, before they won the World Series, or even heck, even after now, it was more like, hey, we're gonna go outside, hang outside, and drink beers. But hey, it's a good time. But yeah, I really do think that you're right. Like, there's something about getting people to the track that is really, I think, what'll get them hooked. But yeah, no, I mean we could talk for hours, but I know you have matters to attend to.
I don't know. She's rolling around, and she often puts herself back to sleep. I'm really fortunate that my daughter's a pretty reasonable sleeper. I think we're good. Okay,
Oh,
she was just moving around a bunch, and I wasn't sure if she was gonna wake herself up or put herself back to sleep. And I think she successfully just went back to sleep. So you mentioned, I think most recently. Yeah, so Drew Dinsick, right, who hosts the co-hosts the Deep Dive podcast. He also does work for NBC Sports. He's been to the Derby a few times now on behalf of NBC, and I like talking to him about the media aspects, because he's aspiring to be, he aspired anyways to get to be more involved in the media side of sports betting, and he got there a bit with NBC and the content that he produces and stuff, and so having him come on and talk about the Derby and covering it was a great way to like sort of check multiple boxes, right? Let's get someone talking about horse racing. Let's get someone talking about the environment of that area and stuff. And it was interesting how he said I can't believe where is the Derby held? The track? Why can't
Churchill Downs.
Churchill Downs? He's like the television broadcast really shows you the few best angles of Churchill Downs. Like he's like, when you walk around there, it really does look like an old rundown track. And it was interesting to get that perspective, because I think without someone telling you that, you think of Churchill Downs as one of these few gems that is just thriving in horse racing. But you forget that it's just 1 week a year that place really thrives. The rest of it is just another old track that's not getting the love and attention that it deserves. It's not, it's struggling to to gain attention like any, like the rest of it. And it really, him describing it that way really opened my eyes to just sort of the reality of where horse racing is. But here's the thing, we there's something about owning a horse that rich people like, right? And so people are going to continue to be interested in that side of it. So long as there's people willing to pay to own and train a horse, these tracks will stay open because that's where they get to play with their toys. And then so long as there's tracks doing it, there's going to be degenerates or recreational bettors that want to bet on it, right? Let's be real. I've seen the worst of the gambling community inside those little lobbies at the horse track, right? It's not glamorous at all times, but so long as those people exist, there's going to be money coming in, and so I don't think horse racing is ever going to get the bump that it wants. It's never going to get the resurgence, but I think that it's just flat and just going to stay there because there's I mean, now rich people are picking up soccer clubs, but I mean, there's gonna be people who want to own and train horses, which means there's gonna be tracks where they can race and compete, which means that there's gonna be gamblers to give that aspect of the industry money, and I think it's gonna be where it's at now for a long time.
Yeah, well, at least the plus side of horses, right? You're not going to have what, if your horse loses, you're not going to get what's happening at Reading right now, where now you got games getting canceled because the fans are so upset they're storming the field. So yeah, I guess that's one plus for horse racing there. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's interesting. The Derby I think is a really good. Is a good example. I've been to Churchill Downs a couple times, and both times I've been there, we paid for the nicest section in the track, all inclusive food. They have a nice buffet, like actually like pretty decent food, like we'll say Aria buffet level, from years past, like pretty decent, and they have drink, free, all you can drink, like everything's included. And the tickets are kind of pricey, $70-$80 or something like that, but they have all that, right? And I remember we were there, and this area probably seats, I don't know, 1,000 people. Probably it's probably maybe even more. Just this small area. There were maybe like 50 people in there, and then walking, because it's so big, I walked over to the paddock. It was under construction. I have a friend, Caitlin Free, who works for Churchill Downs, and she does like the interviews with, she does like the paddock analysis and stuff. And so I'm out there, and I'm, trying to reach her. It takes me like 20 minutes to walk from where I'm at all the way to the other side of the track because it's humongous, and you just see like handfuls of people the entire time. It's incredible. But hey, for the Derby, they sure packed that place in. But the track local to me now was Arlington, but that since closed down. Arlington was basically a palace. It was probably one of the cleanest sports venues I'd ever been to. And now the only one in the Chicago area running is Hawthorne. And I will tell you that is a very stark contrast to what Arlington is. I love Hawthorne. I still go, but they put a sports book in, and the sports book basically takes up half of the space that they have now. It's even at the racetrack, the sports betting is taken over. So I do think that they're gonna that you're right, that they're gonna maintain. I think if anything, we'll see a little bit more contraction. Not to be like super negative on where things are going, but I think maybe we'll see one or two tracks close a year for the next couple of years, and then I think at a certain point, that money isn't going to disappear so much as it's going to redistribute, because I do think that it is going to stay pretty flat. One of the issues that we have with horse racing that you don't have with sports betting is because it's based on a pool. you have computers entering now.
Yeah.
And not to say that you don't have people with models and stuff doing sports betting, but if they enter that sports betting pool, and I know, I was reading, what's the sports betting Bible? What's
Logic of
him?
sports betting.
Logic of sports betting. Thank you. So I was reading Logic of sports betting, and they talk about how you have to think like, yeah, even though you're technically playing against the book, you're really playing against everybody else,
Yes.
because everybody else also influences basically what the book does, right? And then you have the different types of books, and we can you can save that for a more in-depth sports betting talk, but
Yeah.
I still think that there's a couple of degrees of separation there between the computers and the models and the sports books. And by the time Joe Schmo or somebody else is trying to get money in on a game, all that song and dance for the most part has been done. Whereas with horse racing, with the odds updating in real time, that shenanigans is happening reverse. It's happening, you know, at the end. So I know the big thing people like to talk about is closing line value, and making sure that you're getting the right side of it when the line closes. But with horse racing, I mean, that line might close. It closes when the gate opens, and when the computer can get in at the very last minute, and because it's pool based, those odds change, and that's the most money that's going into the pool. I think this is another thing that kind of it just leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, and I'm sure you experienced
Yeah.
that a couple times, especially with Gulfstream. I'm sure there's been times where you placed a bet on a horse that you thought was going to be 8 or 9 to 1, and you come to see that if he ended up going up at 6 to 5, like what happened there?
That I'm glad you brought that up, because I almost had forgotten about that aspect of it, and that has to be a tough sell to the average sports bettor when they're introduced into horse racing, is that the number you get the horse at isn't necessarily the number that your bet's at, and it's just tough for people to really wrap their heads around why that's worth doing. You know, They're
Yeah,
like, what do you mean? Like, I bet it at 9 to 1. Why is it going up to 5 to 1? Well, because money came in on it. Like, but I bet it at 9 to 1. Yeah. I mean, if I don't know. Yeah, I know there's like select books for very select races that'll do fixed odds betting, and I don't know if it would ever work for horse racing, but like that is one change that I think would get more people interested. But I don't know if it's a practical way of doing of the industry. Um,
that's how
but
they
it
do it overseas.
yeah
The UK, it's all I mean, there is a tote, there's still the pool, but most people are betting through bookies. But then you get the same problem as you do here, right? With sports, where you get walked off, rather
yeah
quickly. I've heard there was a guy I know in one of the discords I'm in, who was basically like on his like girlfriend's uncle's friend's account because he had basically gotten walked by so many people that he's just like
I love betters.
he's down to all that. So it's tough, man. Especially, I mean, you see what happens with the retail books. How quickly they walk some people off. I mean, I saw some people getting walked off after they made a deposit. It's
Yeah.
like they make a deposit and they're like, well, no, we can't take that much action. And it's like,
I so I can't get a whole lot down at DraftKings in the soccer markets. Like, I can bet NFL. Like, they don't, like, that's not a problem, right? Like, it's not like, I know some people that are limited everywhere. I'm mostly limited in like futures markets, and I can't get a lot down on soccer. And so it's gone to the point, like, sometimes DraftKings has the best number on something, and sometimes it's like, I don't want to bet it anywhere else because I want that number. Like in the futures market. So like, I start texting my friends and I'm like, hey, if you can get $100 on this, I'll give you a 20% free roll, and like, they don't, they're betting same game parlay, so of course they can get their
yeah,
$100 down, right? And so it's funny how like my friends that are just like that are recreational bettors, they're putting more action in on this like futures bet for me than they're putting in on a whole weekend of NFL betting. But the retail book, it's ridiculous. That's a whole another conversation. But I don't know how long they're going to survive off of the bottom feeding. It, what's bad is there's these accounts on Twitter that really pump out like same game parlays and stuff like that. And if you aren't really paying that much attention, you would swear that all they do is win every weekend. That they just every weekend they have their long shot parlays and they hit one. And so if you see that, everybody wants to have that experience, right? Everybody wants to like hit that, 340 to 1 same game multi-game parlay with, first touchdown score across 6 games and it all gets there or whatever. But people don't realize they're getting really bad odds for the parlay they're putting together. That the odds of the probability of it hitting is not anywhere close to the probability of its payback, and sports books don't want to take action on USL Championship Soccer or NWSL. They don't want to take action on that. They have it there in case one of these degenerates happen to be bored one night, but they don't really want action on that. They want people to sit down for the Chiefs and Dolphins game and fire away a bunch of first touchdown parlays and all of these player prop parlays that are getting horrible odds for it. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent, but I think there's going to be an opportunity in the next 5 years for sharp books that are interested in coming to market, like Circa, like Prime, like Bookmaker and Chris. If they were able to somehow license in the US, like there's going to be an opportunity for that, and I think that they would thrive.
Yeah, it's funny because you were talking about your soccer betting, and it just always reminds me of back when the big poker boom happened. My buddy and I, we didn't play Hold'em. We played Omaha 8 or better, and that was the only game we played.
There's a game,
and the reason why is because you would get these guys who were only played Hold'em, and they'd get bored, and they'd be like, "Oh, there's some action on this table," and they just sit down. They're like, "It's poker is poker." And just like trying to pick as complex of a game as possible, and just like watch people like thinking they win a pot and only see a quarter of the pot coming their way and them get confused.
Yeah.
And so I want to get into into soccer. It's so hard. It's hard. It's hard to watch. And I'm not saying like it's hard to watch, like as in like it's boring. I love soccer. But like the streaming services now, like I don't even know how I can watch MLS. I have no idea.
Apple TV has the rights to it. Yeah.
Apple TV, and then the Premier League I think is on Peacock now.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's tough. And so I take the low hanging fruit, right? I bet football. And obviously no one's gonna get rich betting football unless I don't know, unless you really have an edge, because I mean that's the sharpest game in town. But
I only bet the NFL. The only reason I bet the NFL is one, a little bit of entertainment value, and two, to keep my accounts fresh.
Yeah.
If my accounts kept on seeing nothing but soccer action, I'd get limited too quickly, right? So I pump through some NFL just to put some high market stuff in there.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Tim, I appreciate you so much, man. This is a great conversation. I mean, like I said, we could probably talk for hours about all kinds of stuff, and I could pick your brain on a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, where can people catch you? Like where is your stuff at?
Yeah, at the Bettor Life on X, formerly Twitter, Bettor, if that hasn't been obvious. The Bettor Life, Bettor. It's a very clever pun that I'm proud of. And then you can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. It's called The Bettor Life.
Cool. And obviously, you catch our stuff at onthewronglead.com, at wrong_lead on Twitter. I'm at Cherry Drank on Twitter. And yeah, we'll catch you guys a little bit later. We got a little Vegas music going out here. See you guys.